Hello and welcome to the Education on Fire live podcast. So great to be back with you. And today we're talking all things tutoring. I'm delighted. I'm going to be joined by Arthur Moore. I'm joined by Lucy Alexandra Spencer and also by Sarah Bruner. So delighted to bring them on and welcome all to the show. Oh,
Hi,
thank you
everyone.
so much for joining us.
Evening all.
So, what's so exciting about this for me is the fact that Education on Fire is all about the opportunity of having a child-centered, child-focused idea of what education is all about. And I think tutoring is that ability to really have that in a really sort of focused way and a sense of ownership about your learning and your education in a way that maybe you don't quite get in the classroom. Maybe it's supportive with the classroom. Maybe it's something you do as a homeschool. There's a whole manner of these things, which I'm sure we're going to talk about tonight. So just to get us going, Arthur, why don't you start us off? Give us an idea of what your business is, how you sort of got into it, and your sort of general background to becoming a tutor.
Well, thanks for having us on, Mark. So I was a secondary maths teacher, trained with Teach First around a decade ago, taught in schools across the UK, then moved internationally and taught in a school in Thailand for a number of years. And for the past 4 years, I've been based back in the UK as a full-time online maths tutor. So that's kind of my absolute go-to. Anything that is secondary school, GCSE, A-level maths, that's my game. But on top of that, I also do a couple other things within the tutoring sector. I run a CPD platform for tutors around kind of their pedagogical knowledge. I run a number of WhatsApp groups to support tutors, as well as running a couple of educational podcasts called Teen Teaching and Tutoring Tips. Last year, I was lucky enough to win Tutor of the Year by the National Tutors Association. And basically, I like chatting education. I like chatting tutoring, and I like podcasts, Mark. So this is my space. This is my happy place right here.
This is at 8:30 on a Tuesday heaven for you.
This is it.
Amazing. And you were just saying you've just got off like a group call and everything as well, so you're not completely at the end of your tether just yet. You're still raring to go for the next hour.
No, don't worry. I've been working hard tonight, Mark. I've been tutoring maths, but I made time for you. Don't worry.
I appreciate it very much. Fantastic. And Lucy, tell us all about your world in the tutoring world.
Yeah, so lovely to be with everyone this evening. Like some of my favorite people in the tutoring industry. Like loved chatting with everyone. So I'm a teacher turned private tutor. I taught in primary school actually. I was head of year in a really lovely school in Slough. Then I moved to Dubai. Quite a difference, I would say. And then when I came back to England, I started Education Boutique, which is my tutoring sort of agency, business, whatever you want to call it. We're different though. We do the work out like after school working with parents like many tutors do, but actually what we're very well known for is what we would call reintegrative tutoring with a special educational needs focus for the plethora of children that are out of education with school places that can't meet their needs. And what we do is we're funded by schools, local authorities and EHCP funding with the primary purpose of helping that learner to thrive educationally rather than just get by existing in a school place that kind of is doing some tick box of a job. So that's really what we do is special educational needs, big focus on PDA profiles of autism, daytime education. So if anyone is needing help with that, that's what we do at Education Boutique, basically.
Amazing. Look at that in a nutshell. And Sarah, take us into your world.
Hi everybody. So I am a professional full-time tutor for sciences and maths and have been doing that for the previous 10 years. Prior to that, I don't have a teaching background. I've actually come from an industry background as a scientist. So I worked as an applied physiologist and a governance manager for a large private healthcare company in the UK. It's one of the largest. But I left that to have a family. And I wanted to come back into something that was similar to my previous roles. As a scientist, one of my roles as a governance manager was clinical training other staff. And I really enjoyed that aspect of the job. So I knew that I wanted to not be a tutor. I didn't know I wanted to be a tutor, but I liked tutoring. And I thought, well, I'll just fit something around my family. And 2 hours a week quickly turned into 40 plus hours a week. And I absolutely adore what we do. My business is SB Tutoring, and that's how I got into tutoring.
Amazing. So everyone's got into it a different way, slightly different focus, slightly different backgrounds. For those people who don't know me, my background is originally as a musician. I'm still a professional musician. I'm still teaching within certain schools. Some of it's one-to-one, some of it's ensemble based. So that's kind of my educational sort of input, and the reason Education on Fire came about was because by going through different schools and doing workshops across the way, I very much found lots of teachers in most staff rooms banging their head against a brick wall saying, I got into this to make a difference, and I'm tick boxing and doing all the things that normally happen. But because I was going into so many different places, and this is what I love what we're talking about here, everyone's got so many different backgrounds. It's like, well, I know this person over here who's doing something really amazing, and this organization that's doing this, or this person that's tutoring, or whatever it happens to be. And I thought, if we can just get all these people to hear these different stories, this different way of learning, then maybe that's going to support someone either immediately or certainly take it to someone and they can find out more. So I'm delighted that we've got tutoring as something which we haven't covered before in this particular manner, is a way of being able to share that with everyone. So yeah, really do appreciate your time and your expertise as we go through this. For anybody watching, if you do have a question, just put it in the comments. Be great if you could do a Q column for us, just so that I know it's a comment, a question rather than just a comment. But feel free to chat and put all those things in there. We can bring those things up too. So yeah, make it as interactive as possible. If you know anyone who's actually here, just say hi. We can bring that up and make that as interactive as we can as well. So Arthur, why don't we start with you in terms of what does your working week look like in terms of, the hours, your flexibility in being able to set that up. And, I know you've got a young family as well. So I guess that's sort of an integral part of why it's important for you.
Well, I think that's a really key point, Mark. One of the reasons I left the classroom was I couldn't see how I could be a dad. I had one young child at the time. I've now got three. I couldn't be a dad. I couldn't be a husband. I couldn't be a friend, and also be a teacher. So that's one of the reasons I left the classroom. And I try and keep that in mind with kind of my schedule. So the way my tutoring works for me is I essentially work evenings, Monday to Thursday, and on Saturdays I tutor during the day. So during what most people call the working week, I'm at home either doing kind of the school run, like with the two young children, and then at six o'clock at night, most evenings, I go upstairs to the office, and that's when I kind of log on to do my tutoring. So I very specifically build it around kind of my family kind of life and what works. I do daytime tutoring. There are some days where the kids may be at nursery or other things are going on, and I kind of have like, I'm going to do some work day with other stuff that I do. But actual tutoring, I purposely do in the evening. And that's also when it works for my students. My students are at school. They come home, they have their dinner, they log on and do tutoring. So that's how it works for me. And I talk to a lot of tutors about this, Mark, of saying like, why did you get into tutoring? And don't forget that. So one of the reasons I got into it was so I could be a better dad. And I try and remind myself of that.
And I'm also keen in terms of those people that are coming to you that you're actually tutoring. And you sort of mentioned they're sort of in school, you're giving extra support. Do they often come with you with a specific, I need to learn this thing, or I'm about to do GCSE or A-level, so I need sort of a general bit of support? How does that kind of work?
So with maths and the students I tend to work with, it's as they approach GCSE. So maybe they were in year 9, they're coming into year 10, and there's sometimes a grade focus. So I'm currently at this grade, I want to be at this grade, or from the parents' perspective, that might be. But it normally is either that or my son, my daughter, the child in my house is struggling with confidence in maths, and I'm getting feedback from the school that their confidence is going down. And in the classroom environment, their confidence isn't changing. Is this something you can do? And absolutely, that's something I do. So I work with these students, and over time, as they see that they're not bad at maths, they can actually do this stuff with some support, that goes into the classroom. And then I get feedback from the parent being like, oh, I just had parents' evening last week, and they said that their child is asking more questions, not just in maths, but across the board. And that's when I really feel like I'm actually making a difference to this child. I'm not just getting them from that 7 to 8, which I quite like to do, but also I'm in their other classrooms. They're feeling more confident and they start to they love learning a bit more. And sometimes it's just giving that student a little bit of space where they can be challenged and supported by someone who's outside of their normal kind of zone of school. So I'm not their teacher. I'm not their parent. I'm not their guardian. I'm not a family member who does a bit of maths. I'm just Arthur who appears on the screen once a week and teaches the maths. So that kind of relationship really works with a lot of my students. And that's different to what Lucy and Sarah do with those students. And that's kind of the brilliant thing about tutoring, of whatever your child needs, there's a tutor for that.
Yeah, and you said on screen. So is everything that you do pretty much going to be online?
So I am a full-time online tutor. I don't go to houses. People don't come to me. And that's different. Like if you ask Sarah that question, it's a completely different answer. If you ask some tutors, they have little workshops. They have their offices where students come from. It might be down the bottom of a garden. They've got a separate office down there. I go upstairs and I log on Zoom. So again, Zoom, happy place.
Yeah, great. Well, and he mentioned you, Sarah, so he's obviously wanting you to fill in those gaps as well. So let's do the same for you, your working week and how it works for you.
Yeah, so I tutor similar subjects. I tutor maths and I tutor all 3 sciences as well. But variety is the spice of life for me, Mark. So I do everything, with the exception of students coming to me. So I do a mix of online and a mix of face-to-face, going to students' houses. So my day looks like, in the daytime, I go out and I see my special educational needs students who are either on alternative provision, and Lucy's the expert here for that, or I will be looking at students who have come out of mainstream schooling through elective home education, albeit I would say the majority feel like that's a forced elective home education where their child's needs weren't being met, their special educational needs weren't being met in school, or that their health has deteriorated to such a level that they just cannot even get to school, sometimes cannot even get dressed. So I feel in those sort of circumstances, really face-to-face is the best fit for those particular children. And then, like Arthur, in the evenings, I've actually switched things up. I was going out face-to-face in the evening as well, but now I've made it completely online. That's to suit my personal circumstances at home. And I do Saturday mornings as well, but I'm actually changing my day up a little bit. I'm trying to reduce my hours because I loved it so much. I went a bit gung-ho, and I come from a background of 60, hospital work is like 60 plus hours a week, 60, 70 plus. And so I need to redistribute that and learn what is healthy. And so it's an experiment. Every year is an experiment, and you kind of work around with your hours. And that's the beauty actually of being a self-employed tutor, I think, as well. Like what Arthur was saying, molding it to your lifestyle as much as the children that you're serving.
And I'm curious because you sort of mentioned at the beginning there about, I thought I'd do 2 and then I had 40 or whatever it happened to be.
Yeah.
How did that happen? Was that word of mouth for you? Were you trying to get lots of people really quickly, or is it just there's such a need that you were sort of the answer to everyone's problems, as it were?
I think there was demand rather than I went and sought it. I initially started actually working for an agency, so similar agency to what Lucy runs, because I wasn't ready to start my own business. That wasn't even in the plan. There was no plan, really. I've just kind of stumbled in this world and realised actually I'm quite good at it. And so it was a toe in the water to test it out, see, does this work for me? Am I right for it as well? Am I the right fit? Am I a good tutor? And so the agency started giving me more and more work. They get word of mouth from parents very quickly. They get feedback quickly. And people like what I did. And then after a year and a half, decided to do it myself. And then, Mark, about the word of mouth, that's definitely one of the major kind of processes or systems that works in the tutoring world. Parents love to talk to other parents. and they're very quick to recommend tutors to each other. I mean, having said that, I always recommend that even if you've been recommended someone, do go and do some research on them. Go in the background, see what they're like, and actually talk to them as well. So I've been interviewed by parents, like literally across the table, almost formally interviewed, but I don't mind because it's their children that you know, the most important thing to them, and you don't want to place them with somebody who's perhaps not safe or is not qualified as they may have stated, or whatever it may be.
I think that peace of mind is incredibly important, isn't it? Because you, as a parent, there's something about my child's going to this school where you kind of think, good, they're safe, they're being looked after. There's so many sort of protocols and frameworks in place to kind of make sure that has to be the case. And we all know there, you know, there's a relative range of schools as well, but there's something perceptually about that. Whereas an independent company, a person, a tutor is out of a lot of people's understanding. And so I think it, like you say, it's great to sort of make the most of what that is, because there's personality differences as well as sort of, I would imagine, a lot of those other things that happen as well. And we'll sort of dive into that sort of business aspect and how people go about that coming up. But Lucy, tell us about your sort of 9 to 5, as it were. I know you sort of touched on it to begin with, but I would imagine this is going to be very different. Yeah.
Love to have a night. What is a 9 to 5? No. So for me, just to like explain, like my journey was absolutely from the role of an independent private tutor. So I remember leaving the classroom thinking, I think I've heard Arthur talk about this, thinking like, okay, I could do it 6 months and see how I am at the end of it. And if not, I'm sure I could get a job back in the classroom. Like my own mum said to me when I left that I'd be unemployable, and was I sure I couldn't just make it work, you know? She's sitting downstairs looking after my dogs at the moment to make sure they don't bark. But like, yeah, she was not like, you know, it's quite a big step. And I think it's very important that when we talk about tutoring, we don't like glamorize how quick you can actually pick up students, because there is a lot of careful positioning. There's a lot of like quite a lot of bravery taking that step for educators, that especially those that come from the classroom, because it's a very safe job teaching, isn't it? You know, it's a very safe job, and then suddenly you're like not doing something safe, and everyone has a lot to say about it. So my 9 to 5 now, 3 years ago I actually sold a little part of Education Boutique to eTeach. They are one of the largest educational recruitment specific jobs boards in the UK. The reason I did that is I want to make a difference to the lives of the 1.7 million SEN children that are struggling in the education system in England today. I'm on a real like scaling journey with my business now. So it's very much, I'm like a cheerleader for tutoring is what I kind of describe myself as. I love coming and talking about anything tutoring. So obviously when Arthur was like, you know, talking about this podcast, I was like, yes, always yes, anything about tutoring, I'm there, because it really has changed my life, but also I see how it's changing like learners who need a different and a bit more bespoke way of learning's life. So my day, I have a team in the office that deal with the over 300 local authorities in England. So we have all the consultants that have different areas assigned to them. I'm working on with them to coach them to know how to, you know, sort of reach out to the right people, speak to the people who might be caseworkers for the learners who they currently can't meet the needs of. And I guess the thing that we do differently is that we're in person. We were talking about that Arthur's totally online, Sarah's a bit of a hybrid. We also do deliver online, but only if someone at the very beginning of their journey, like Sarah mentioned earlier, that almost can't even leave their bedroom because social anxiety is so much for them. We only use online as a tool to initially build a relationship with someone that it's not possible to get physically in front of. And then we're very, very quick to sort of work through the different ways that we can reintegrate them back into a suitable, sustainable setting. So I feel like I'm a bit of I'm not teaching too much. Sometimes I do get to do my ultra high net worth clients sometimes still. I'm a director of a non-exec director of the Tutors Association. I'm also a trustee of a charity and things like that. So I feel like I get to just very much focus on impact and, you know, speaking with, obviously dealing with a lot of the complaints and the tribunal process around provision where it hasn't been, you know, sort of correctly put in place. And so I'm working with parents, sometimes with local authorities, and sometimes representing both of them at the same time, which can be challenging. So it's very varied.
Yeah. And do you sort of miss the day-to-day teaching side of it, or do you kind of feel like you've sort of not grown into your new role, but that's this sort of
It's
new
such a
kind of
good
part of it is
question.
good?
I actually don't, because I literally live vicariously through all of my tutors and the students and like these guys, like, you know, I'm always on LinkedIn, Mark. So I always feel like I'm still connected. I do little bits of tutoring as well. Like I say, I go traveling with some of my clients that I've been working with for over 8 years now since I started the business. So there is a little bit of a I do still keep, because I think it's really important as a director to still be teaching and be current. So yeah, I feel very lucky, you know, to be able to do a bit of a mixture.
Yeah, and I love that as well. But I mean, I sort of have the ultimate portfolio job. You know, one minute I'm in a concert hall, then I'm in a school teaching, and then I'm podcasting, and then I'm orchestral manager for an opera season. I mean, there's all manner of different things going on. But I think there's something about this world, the podcasting world and the online, that even though I'm not a teacher in inverted commas, you know, I don't have that teaching background, the teaching's come through music, but so much of what I talk about and what we talk about and share from people that are on the show is just that it's about the human to human connection.
Yeah,
It's about
exactly.
what you're trying to do and how you're meant to impact people going through. Arthur, yeah.
What I also think is really interesting on kind of that point is I actually have found coming out of the secondary school environment has allowed me to refine my love of teaching. And I know I bang on to Sarah and Lucy about this. Like I love now actually going into the depths of like how can I teach my students better, kind of going into the pedagogy behind it, the cognitive science, doing the research, doing the reading, kind of all that around it. And kind of being a tutor has allowed me to evolve as a better educator. I'm a way better teacher now than I was in the classroom because I've also got that space and kind of mental space to keep pushing with my CPD and not have to worry about maybe these other things. So, like as you were saying, like that's one of the joys of tutoring is it's allowed me
Yeah.
to kind of love teaching.
I would agree, and I would take it one step further and say it actually allows you, I feel this profoundly myself, but I don't know if you guys would agree, but it allowed me to kind of almost find my own identity again, because when I was a classroom teacher, it was so frenetic, it was so like constant and like all encompassing. And I almost like didn't, I realize now I didn't really exist outside of a school in a way that I do now. I have a lot more time. I'm very big on like yoga, meditation, and like just time and being present in the moment and things. And I just realized that that whole time I wasn't really that present for my children in my class because I was constantly thinking of the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And I think that's one thing as a tutor, you really do get to be very present with the student that you're with, designing something specific for them or actually asking how they are and having time to finish the conversation. I think that's one of the most amazing things about tutoring for me.
I can imagine. And Sarah, how is it for you? Like you said, you sort of had a career shift in some respects.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
do you sort of miss that sort of pre-children career, or did you bring a lot of that into what you're doing now? How did that work for you?
That's such a good question. It's, yeah, a complete pivot, really. Not anymore. So when I did leave that career, I would say I grieved definitely for a year or so because there was a time period where I didn't jump straight into tutoring. So I had my children and decided to go into tutoring um, just after my second one was born. And so I had this time period where I was taking lots of different jobs, itty bitty jobs. You know, I worked at the cinema and I worked in the theatre front of house, and I worked for a children's disabled charity, doing all sorts of things with them. And during that time, I definitely missed being a scientist. But going through tutoring now, I think enough time has passed, and I've really found, like Lucy said, an identity that I think was always there. Actually, I think I'm using all the skills, similar skills to what I had. There's a lot of people skills involved. I'm coming up with sort of bespoke programs for people, albeit it's not, treatments or anything like that, or discussing conditions with them, but it's discussing exams with them or topics or whatever it may be. So there's a lot of skills I've brought over, but certainly found a new identity. I'm very happy in that identity that tutoring brings. And like Arthur was saying, just having the space to pursue it in the way that you want to pursue it, and the direction that you want to take it. And although we're all tutors, you can see we've all taken it in a slightly different direction. We've all got our own sort of niche, I guess, with it within tutoring. Yeah.
And the thing that I've really enjoyed just in this sort of last week or so, we started putting all this together, is that my ill-conceived perception would have been the fact that tutoring is kind of very sort of sporadic and it's everywhere. It's not like being in a school where you're all in the same place week on week and that kind of thing. But it seems like the community as a group of tutors and that kind of world is really, really not only kind of close knit, but also there's a lot of support and there's a lot of love. There's a lot of sort of openness about it, which I think is what I think everyone in education wishes was across the board. But it seems to be that tutoring is definitely one of those things. I mean, maybe take us into that, Lucy, a little bit, because like you say, you're sort of the LinkedIn queen, as it were.
Well, no,
LinkedIn queen.
I love LinkedIn, I'm not gonna lie. I'll take that. Thank you. But no, like I just think that it was really nice to hear you say that, Mark, actually, because I think it's something that as an industry we've worked really, really hard on over the last like 5 to 6 years. I joined the tutoring industry almost 9 years ago when I started EB, and I have to admit it wasn't the lovely, warm space that we find ourselves in now. There wasn't the sort of support out there oh gosh, I was saying this, I think it was to you, Arthur, the other day, like when a tutor or a teacher chooses to come into education and tutoring now, the plethora of like options they have for support is almost overwhelming. And for me, when I don't know about you two, but for me, it was the opposite way. It was overwhelming how little support there was out there at the time when I joined. So it's really nice to hear that that's your perception of the industry for where you see it now, Mark, because that is something that we have all been working very hard in the background to do, because there was a time where tutoring was thought of this like wild west of the education system, and we all know that that is not the place that we see ourselves. Students don't see that as their tutors really can have a very profound impact on their life. And so, yeah, like that really is music to my ears. I'm very happy to hear that you did that. So, yeah.
Fantastic. And Arthur, what do you think?
One of the shifts I've seen, Mark, and you may have heard me and Sarah introduce ourselves as professional tutors. We use that phrase rather than private tutors, and it feels like a really small syntax change, but I've seen that in the kind of the industry has kind of changed a lot of people's perception. So private implies that this is all mine, leave me alone, I do this, whereas professional is like, no, I'm just part of an industry here. So for example, me and Sarah, we teach the exact same subject at the same level. I often will say, Sarah, I've got a student come to me, I can't, like, it's not working out in terms of maybe the time or something. Like, is it okay if I pass on your details? And that works same. And there's a whole group of us maths tutors. We should not want to share, but we pass students round to who we think is the best match. And we don't do it because I get a referral fee or because then Sarah owes me big time. I do it because I know that it's good for the industry, and then for the industry is going to be good to me. So I think that's been a real shift. And Lucy spoke about the Tutors Association, and there are other groups of tutors, national tutors kind of out there. But kind of the Tutors Association, as an example, which we are all part of, kind of represents 50,000 tutors across the UK. And that's given an extra layer of that kind of professionalism. We have awards evenings. We have conferences that we go to. We have online kind of meetups. We have in-person meetups. And as you're saying, it's very much, there is an industry now there full of professionals, rather than just the odd person down the road who might do a bit of maths tutoring on the side.
And we are really trying to evolve it still. So it's not sitting here saying, hey, it's a finished article. My goodness, no. So that's important to say as well. There's a lot of innovations that still needs to happen in the industry. So that's also important to just say at that point as well, I think.
Yeah, and I think this sort of the professionalism, the idea of an industry, the idea that there are so many people supporting the traditional system, as it were, as well as people that are outside of it, as opposed to, like you say, that perception that there's somebody that I know who lives down the street who may or may not have been a teacher, but it's quite good at helping you out with this sort of thing. And I think that perception is very old school, but I think that maybe it's in some people's backgrounds when they're suddenly having to step into that, I need to find a tutor, is that the way it still is, and those sorts of things. And I'm curious to know, Arthur, you sort of mentioned that I've got a pupil, I can pass it on to Sarah or whoever. How's the kind of relationship in terms of different subjects? Do you sort of have as close a knit community with, you know, whether it's languages or the arts or whatever it happens to be, or is this sort of the subject specific thing, obviously, where you sort of have your sort of initial kind of friendship, as it were?
Yeah, so pretty much over my kind of 4 years, I've now got kind of the network that I have for pretty much every subject area, for every kind of age group, every level, whether they want in person, whether they kind of want online across the country. So if someone comes to me and I can't work with that student for whatever reason, I very rarely say, right, I can't help you, goodbye. I'll say, I can't help you, but like, let me go let me pass on this email address, or give me 2 days and I will come back with a kind of selection of tutors who I know. So it absolutely works off the ball. And that's the really nice thing about kind of LinkedIn, and kind of we've got our WhatsApp groups and kind of WhatsApp communities and all these kind of different worlds. And what's also nice is everyone's kind of connected via someone else, and that person's normally Lucy Alexandra Spencer, but you can go via someone. So even if I didn't have someone, I'd be like, right, history GCSE aiming for a grade 9. Sarah, do you know any great tutors? And Sarah will go, do you know what? XYZ, pass them on. And again,
we do that. I mean, it's at least twice a week for me. I'm doing that. And the good thing is, you know, I was talking about word of mouth, do still check them out, is that we've checked these people out. We've met them. We've had Zoom cups of tea together. We've met them in person at conferences. So we know what these people are like. We've met them before. And so I would only ever recommend somebody that I know, and I know what their tutoring's like, and I've met them in person as well. So if you are a parent watching this, I always say to you, if you have a tutor already, go to your tutor first, even if they don't tutor that subject. Tap into their networks, see who they know, if you need a psychology tutor or whatever it may be.
And then, Mark, you get an even more support. Me and Sarah, there's one student who we both tutor different subjects for at the same level, have done for a couple of years. We swap ideas and we say, like, oh, by the way, like, I just noticed this with this student this week. Have you noticed this? Like, so that student is not just getting support in most separate subjects, but they're kind of getting an even more holistic support. So yeah, it's a really nice place to be. And as Sarah said, like, if you're a parent watching this being like, I've got a tutor for maths, I want one for English, go to your maths tutor. And like say, is there someone you can recommend? And that's just a great way to kind of go about it.
Yeah, that's great to hear. And my next question is you sort of talk about the parent side of it. Is there a particular pathway or set of questions or anything that you would recommend a parent be aware of when they're sort of stepping into this for the first time? You know, you sort of said about recommendations and those sorts of things, but definitely, you know, there's never a right way of doing it, but maybe a way that's going to be the most supportive, especially if you're a bit nervous about heading into this world. And Arthur seems to think, Lucy, you're the person for the job here.
Well, no, I'm not the only one, but I'm very happy to take the first thing. So, firstly, safety is really important. So I don't want to come across as sounding like, you know, tutoring at the moment is an unregulated sort of industry. Now, that is something that we are working on as an industry to find the appropriate ways to help parents and signpost parents to what is going to be right for them. Because for different reasons, there may be parents who care about different, you know, qualifications and XYZ. And I think the main thing for me as a top tip or step would be to always categorically ask to see a paper copy or check the update service on the internet of the DBS for the tutor that you're working with. Now, we could spend probably 2 days talking about all the intricate other things that you could be checking. But the update service is a really important tool that a tutor can share with a parent to show that at the point that that parent checks it online, they are clear to work with children and adults as well. So if you have a child or a young person that is older than child age, then obviously there is also an adult DBS as well, which is very important to know that there's those two distinctions. But I would say that as a real, high level highlight, that would be a key thing to be asking for. And then it's like when Ofsted go into a school, the first thing they check is, the safeguarding and the single central register, and that's all up to date. And then they come in and look at the learning. For me, that's the thing that I always say. And, there are things like the Tutors Association, they do checks on all their members. So there's like a searchable function there. You can ask for sort of social proof. So speak to your friends, speak to your tutors, like you say. But yeah, I think that for me would be the key one, obviously.
And I guess when you go into a school, it's like if you're going into a secondary school when your child's moving on, or even if you're sort of doing that first sort of steps into primary, you can look and you can see this has got a good Ofsted rating. I know someone who's been there, they've had a nice time. But there's something that you get as you walk through the door, which you can't necessarily always put your finger on.
Yeah.
I think maybe the more you're in education, the more you understand how they've got there. But there's something about the feeling, the understanding, the care that's given to children and the way they respond that comes across. And I guess that's the same when, like Sarah, you mentioned before, that idea of sort of almost interviewing a tutor. You sort of get that sense of there's something about this person that I really like. There's something about the professionalism or the care that comes across, or the understanding of what we think they might need from my child. And so that's a good reason to go through. So Sarah, can you
Yeah,
sort of take us into
absolutely.
that a bit
Yeah.
more?
I was going to say it's really important to find a match. So the first tutor you pick, you don't have to stay with that tutor. It's not necessarily like school. If we're comparing to sort of school, and you're like, well, I'm in this school now, it's a real, pain to have to move schools if it's not the right one. If it's not the right tutor, there's thousands of other tutors out there that, could be a match for your child. So certainly, I think in the first few sessions, you could give a tutor a few sessions, and you'll know your child will feed back and say if it's good or not, and whether they're getting on with that tutor. And I always recommend that parents in the room or in the background, very nearby, because the parents can listen in and see how the tutoring session's going on. It's not that they're checking on you; they're just, you know. Doing due diligence with their safeguarding of their child, but also seeing if the child's building that rapport, because rapport is such a key aspect. The relationship between you and the child is such a key aspect as to whether they're actually going to gain anything from that tutoring. If you're not getting on and they clam up, then they're not going to learn. So I think initially I always speak to the parents that I work with on the phone, and then we'll have a face-to-face meeting, or we'll have a meeting on Zoom first. I always like to meet the child ahead of time to introduce myself. I think it's really important they hear your voice, they see your face. So even if I'm going to just be working online with them and they can't make a Zoom meeting before, I say, oh, why don't you go on my YouTube channel, watch one of my videos on this in maths or this in science, and they can just see my face, get used to my voice, how I deliver things. And that's so important, I think, that to check, is this going to be a match for my child? Is this the kind of person I want to come into my home?
And
Yeah.
what's the flip side of that? Because of course you've got requirements and expectations as well, I guess. You're working in this way, is there things that you're going to be doing between sessions? How much time is that going to take? Obviously it's going to, I guess, geared towards what the child needs and that kind of thing. But how do you sort of then go about being very clear so that the parents know, and also that the child knows this is what we're doing and why we're doing it? Because I guess some children are going to be like, yeah, I want to do this because, like, say if they're older and they're like, I want to get a better grade, or I want to make sure I can do this. That's a different conversation than a much younger child who's doing it because the parents or someone around them is thinking this is definitely what they're going to need in order to help them.
Yeah. I think setting out from the start really clear expectations. First of all, I'll ask them what their expectations are as parents. What do you want out of it? And I always like the child to be present and say, well, what are you looking for tuition? Was it your idea? Because quite often now, children are going to their parents and saying, can I have a tutor? I'm hearing that more and more, that that the children are asking the parents, not the other way around. Like I think it historically was, we'll get you a tutor, you're struggling in maths, you got a grade, whatever. So the children are asking more and more. And I always ask the child, what are you looking to have from tuition? What would your ideal tutoring session look like? And then I'll outline my expectations of what I expect of the child to come to the session like, and what they need, and what looking ready to learn looks like, basically. Homework, I'm 50-50 on. It's up to them if they want it. So yeah, I leave that to the parents' discretion.
I really love that
Before you
comment.
ask,
Sorry, Lucy. Yeah,
before
carry
you
on.
ask, Arthur, one of the other things I was thinking, especially with Sarah and Arthur, you know, for parents, they've won awards, you know, like, so I think that, you know, if you can see as a parent that like Arthur's won multiple awards, Sarah's won multiple awards, you're not going to get them from an association unless you're pretty amazing, you know. So I think that sometimes tutors are a little bit humble about, maybe they see it as like being like, oh yeah, like I'm award winning, but like that is genuinely very comforting to a parent to see, wow, you know, like that's such an achievement. And obviously that, yeah, I just think that that's also something that will really give parents a lot of, you know, like support into making that decision about who's right.
Oh, thank you, Lucy.
And just to be clear, we're talking about tutoring awards, not just general awards for any particular.
I got a gold star. I got a gold
Exactly,
star once.
exactly.
Well done.
So-
Have a sticker.
and just picking up on something Sarah said, I think that idea of children saying about tutoring is really interesting, because I think whether it's different in this day and age for whatever reason, but I hear this quite a lot about children really knowing what it is about a teacher that makes them a good teacher. And it's not about the ones that give them the highest grades, or the ones which it's all easy. They seem to really have a good concept of kind of, this teacher is really good because, and also the flip side of that as well. And that sense of, I think I could do better in this, or I could achieve more if I had that support. So it really doesn't surprise me that there are people saying, can I have a tutor in this? Just because they know there's an area of growth there, which maybe they're not getting within their sort of current surroundings. And I guess given circumstances and the ability to sort of have that extra tuition, it really is going to make a big difference, because you're taking ownership then as a young person in your education, which of course is what you're doing there on in, if you're going to go to university, or even if you're training within a job or a different field. So it's a really, really sort of important factor that. Going back to the awards, how does that come about in terms of, like, say, it's organised within associations, within sort of your sort of community itself? Is it people that put you towards it? Are there certain categories? How does that work? Arthur is one of the award-winning people. Tell us about sort of your circumstances and your experience of that.
So when I applied last year and this year, essentially it is an application form that you are filling in, but you have to have references as part of that from multiple, in my case, parents of students I'm working with, who can then be contacted by the association if they need to kind of cross-check or anything like that. So they are very much, they're categories for different kind of awards. So we have industry awards for individual tutors, but we also have awards for tutoring companies, and kind of different ways to go about. The criteria reset, they then go to a proper committee and panel, and they are kind of Sarah will be able to go about this more as one of the members of the panel this year, right, Sarah? Is that right? With a different
The last 2 years I've been a judge.
So
Yeah.
they're not just, I phone up and go, I'm pretty amazing. Sarah goes, yeah. Don't worry,
I've made space on the shelf and it's all ready to go.
Yeah. I'm cleaning my shelf, like just with Sarah on WhatsApp going, I've got this. It's a proper kind of systematic approach to it. And when you go to the awards, if you see the standard of the tutors there, like I know all the tutors who were kind of shortlisted for the award that I eventually won that year, and they are some top quality educators, and I have seen them kind of tutoring, and they are awesome. So just if you're seeing a tutor that has been nominated or shortlisted or is putting themselves forward for these awards, that is a brilliant sign that this is someone who is taking their professional kind of tutoring really seriously. And it's because you're seeing someone who is kind of saying, I'm invested in myself, you know they're going to be doing the background work on whether it's their subject knowledge or their pedagogical knowledge or kind of how they're working with parents and stuff like that. And that comes back to what you were saying earlier, Mark, of what should parents be looking for. I'd be talking with the tutor, being like, what do you do outside of sessions? Like, are you part of an organization? Do you do meetups? Do you talk to any other tutors? Because you'll get this little sense of who they are. And it might be, oh, I don't do anything with tutor Moors, but I every Sunday I'm down my local community centre helping out with this, or I'm coaching this. And you get a bit more feel for the person. And as you were saying again, Mark, the students pick up on that. They want someone who is going to help them with the subject, with the content that they are trying to learn. That's probably number one. But also they want to feel like they are in a safe, supportive environment. And students and children are very good at saying when they don't feel secure. They're very good at feeling that. They're very good at sensing I don't feel secure here. So that's they're the conversation I'll be having with my parents. And that's all kind of tied in with this idea of awards and someone who is taking their own professionalism seriously.
Yeah. Well,
I thought
sorry,
just
Lucy.
something that you said as well, Mark, about your experience of finding a tutor because you wanted a particular sort of university type thing. Just remember that just because someone has been to a university does not mean that they're going to be a great pedagogical educator. I think that is important to say. And I know that there will be many educators who have been to a university and then are great educators. But I think there is this thing with parents where they see like you're Oxford, you're Cambridge, you're this, and they stop asking any of the questions that we've just been talking about because they see that as like, oh, that's what I want for my child. That must mean that this person is going to help them achieve that goal, which might be absolutely right. But please, as a parent, don't let that stop you going deeper just because you see a name of an institution. That does not make someone a great teacher on your child's team.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And our circumstances were slightly different to that. It was more the fact that in order to get to a university that she wanted to, there were certain grades that she wanted to do. And that, a bit like we talked about before, that support in order of sort of, nothing's guaranteed, obviously, but if you're working specifically outside of the school to be able to do that. And again, that sort of came from what I was saying before in terms of you get an idea of there's more here. I think I can get more out of myself. I think there's a way of doing this, but you almost come to a bit of a roadblock because it's like I'm doing everything I'm being told, but there's something either not quite clicking or I'm not quite sure how to just guarantee I can get this number of marks on this particular question, and I'm the last person to know how all that works these days. But that particular thing, whereas another subject, it's that kind of, for whatever reason, I kind of get this and it seems to flow, and I understand how that gets put together. So that extra bit of support seems to be a way forward. But I'm exactly the same as you, certainly within the school field as well. Just because this school has this name or it costs this money or these people go there doesn't necessarily, once you're involved in those things, mean how that actually works in the nitty-gritty and around those things as well. And we have a question come through, so let me just share this for a moment. So Effie, I think if that's exactly how you say it, I hope that's how you say your name. What makes a good tutor in your opinion? So I guess a few of the things that we said, but why don't you each take a punt at that in terms of what you think would make a good tutor? Arthur, why don't you start us off?
I think I've said this phrase before and I keep coming back to it in kind of my own world. A good tutor is someone who challenges the students to do better, but supports them to do better. And it getting that balance right. So it's not just, I'm going to set you really hard stuff and make sure you get better at stuff. And it's not just giving you so much support that the student is not actually challenging himself and doing the learning. It's getting that balance right. Like, we know that learning is difficult. Actually doing something new, thinking hard is really difficult to do. So if the student comes out of the session and goes, that was all really easy, I'd be asking, was that kind of a good overall learning experience? So a good tutor to me is someone who challenges their students, but in a supportive environment, and uses their knowledge as a teacher to do that.
Love that. Sarah?
So I work with a lot of special educational needs students, and I find two things really helpful that makes a good or a great tutor. Number one, infinite patience. There's one thing you'll never hear me say, and that is, you should know this by now. I will never, ever say that phrase because it was said to me when I was younger studying, and I just remember those feelings of, okay, I'm really embarrassed. I'm actually there's a bit of shame, and those feelings sort of come on, and then you close down. So for all learners, but especially for my SEN learners, infinite patience. I will go through things again and again and again, and in slightly different ways. They're obviously not getting it that way. We try something different. Um, and the second is just being completely non-judgmental. So you start tutoring at the point that they're at when you first meet, and it's a blank slate. It's fresh. And you go from there. Whatever's happened in the past is the past, whatever their background is, how they've come to be in the situation they're in, none of it matters. So infinite patience for me, and a real non-judgmental approach to working with families.
What Sarah said there about meeting the student where they're at is an
Yeah.
absolutely brilliant way of putting it. Like, I wish I'd put it as well as that, Sarah. That is absolutely.
That's why we're here as a team. That's why we're here as a team.
I'm stealing that going forward. I've always
Yeah,
said, Mark, you need to meet the student where
It's
they're
like
at. Like, I'll
upgrading
say it
the
once, I'll say it
sentences
again.
every time.
You're quite right, Arthur. You're quite right.
And Lucy.
So for me, it's about energy. So typically in a school, there's a lot of things that are drawing a child's energy. And you've heard the spoon analogy, you get to the end of the day, you don't have any spoons left. I think the real joy for an educator and for the learner is that it's like a collaborative quest for, like, it could be learning, it could be development, it's growth. I mean, it's like this shared energy rather than the teacher coming in and being like, this is what you need to do for the curriculum. And then like the child's like giving all they possibly can to try and achieve these things. It's like one of the consultants in my team, she has this stepping stones, on like a little pond kind of going across. And like, if you like, the curriculum is the stepping stones, like the little stones in the water. And then we're like the tutors who are like putting the learner maybe in the water and be like, okay, let's go, let's get you to the next one. Like with the water that's surrounding them going, okay, how are we going to get you to the next stepping stone? And like, so we're not on this track, this runaway train, if you like, that all roads lead to university. We're able to go like, what does your road look like? Like what is, like Arthur, like Sarah said, where are you right now? Where do you want to go? And how are we going to get you to that next stepping stone, so you can actually achieve the long-term goal? Like that's what tutoring is for me, really.
Amazing. So much great value there. And if you've got any more questions and you're watching, please do put them in the chat. We've got a few minutes left, so we'll try and answer everyone's questions if you have any more coming through. I've got a couple of things that I just want to cover as well. The first is, I know from my personal experience, there's something about the relationship of one-on-one teaching where you can really have conversations where you get a really good understanding of their mindset, where they are, like you say, their personality, and you can gear your lesson around that to get the most out of them, and that relationship sort of hopefully blossoms over the weeks, months, years, or however long that you're doing it. How does it work if you're doing a group session? Is it just the same but a little bit expanded, as it were, or do you have to take a different approach? Arthur, why don't you start us off?
So it's the same, but it's different. So I use the same approaches to teaching the content that I'm going to do, but I slightly change about maybe the way I'll deliver that content. And I put a lot of effort into kind of the background of thinking about the question strategies I'm going to use, how I'm going to scaffold it for different learners, the prompts I'm going to use for different students for each question. And I kind of take a bit more, really kind of go back to my pedagogical experience and kind of learning and kind of use that with my students. So I hear a lot about kind of what one-to-one must be better than group. And I work one-to-one and I work with groups. And with some students, like there will be a better answer. But group has so many extra things it can bring into it, because you're able to, let's take a maths example. A student comes to me and goes, I only want to focus on this topic because that's the one I'm really struggling with. And then kind of the way the sessions works, no matter what I do, like that, they want that to be the focus of the session, and we'll end up focusing on one thing. Whereas if I've got 5 students who are all bringing their one thing that we need to focus on, every student is automatically going to be focusing on 5 things. So we're automatically covering more content every single week. And then we can start to see the link between those contents. We can start to do some interleaving learning. We can start to do some distributed learning practice theory. And like, that's going to make a huge difference. And what I found with my group students who are maybe a bit reluctant to start with, I've kind of gone for group because that's the availability I've got. Within a bit of time, they start to see that they're growing in confidence. They start to see that they're kind of able to do more stuff in class. They're able to do more stuff in the session, and they start coming to the session really kind of keen for the groups. And I have students now, if I said one-to-one, they'll be like, can you put on a group session like I can come to? So I think it absolutely has a place, but I think that's when, as a tutor, kind of we have to really rely on our expertise and what we do. And I think that's a really important part of tutoring, is we don't just say, oh, if I add an extra student to the Zoom call, I'll just do the same stuff. Oh, I'll just add an extra one. And before you know it, I've got 30 kids. Oh, I'll just set them homework each week. Maybe I'll do an assessment. I'll keep it logged on, and I'll go for, I'll do a parent. Oh, wait, I'm just a classroom teacher. And like, that's the whole point we're trying to get to it. Way. So I know tutors that do large groups, but they tailor their sessions to kind of adapt to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do groups as well, Mark, and they're slightly larger than Arthur's groups. So currently I go up to sort of 10 students. And again, I do face-to-face one-to-one, but I have students who specifically ask for groups, or their parents do, because one-to-one's too intense. It's, if you've got an hour with a child or 45 minutes, whatever it is, one-to-one, it's too intense for them, and the child needs to kind of sit back, not in terms of not participate, but they just need to be part of a group. And I've also found that the discussion you get within the groups is fantastic, because they will help each other. They tutor each other. I don't have to step back entirely, but because you're facilitating it. But I've certainly found with particularly the age group 11 to 14, they're really keen on coming on the mic and the whiteboard and telling everybody their method for doing things. So all of a sudden, I have my method, and then I have two more methods for working out this maths problem or discussing something in chemistry, and it's fantastic. It's so good. So I think it depends on the learner, what they're looking for. And again, that's setting out the expectation at the start when you first have that contact with a parent. Sometimes, like Arthur said, it's just down to availability, that they really want to work with you, but they have to slot in a group first. And all my students on my groups will get priority for any one-to-ones that I have come up. So in the holidays, for example, or a cancellation. And again, that's another kind of sort of perk of being in the group, that they get a sort of priority with me.
And I guess the other thing is that everyone in the group has something in common, because they're all there for the same sort of reason, I guess. So it's not like in a normal classroom where you'll just happen to be there because you have to be in school and you might live in the same sort of area. You're coming from, an extra learning mindset. You're wanting to achieve this. You're working together. You're suddenly realizing you've got that camaraderie because you're all gaining, like you say, from everyone else that's going through. And I can really understand that. Yes, Arthur, we'll go back to you, and then I'll let Lucy finish us off.
I was going to say, one really nice thing about the kind of group environments that maybe I do online is the students, they don't know each other. They have absolutely no relationship with each other. So maybe when they're in class, they're like, I think I know a method, but I won't say it because that person that I know, that table, the people I know there, I don't want to get right in front of those. I often get with my groups, people just being like, oh, I'll give it a go, because the other 4 people in front of me, I literally have no idea with them. I have no relationship. So I don't mind putting myself out there. And then they put themselves out there and they get some stuff right, and they go to the classroom like, do you know what? Maybe I will put forward that answer. And again, that feedback where it starts to spin into the classroom is a really kind of a real added bonus of groups.
Yeah, I love that. And Lucy, finish it off for us.
Yeah, no, I think the peer modeling that's been mentioned already is such like, as an English teacher as well, like I'm all about creative writing, and just you get more vocab out of a group situation. But I guess the bespoke design that I know both Sarah and Arthur have touched on there is so key. And I think that, again, when you're looking as a parent to go into, during COVID, I was doing not groups, I was doing what's called master classes. So that's like a webinar function where the children can't see each other. And at times I was doing like over 400 children at a time, but they didn't know that. And they didn't have their cameras on. It wasn't like anything like that. But I think the design of those sessions, it was totally free during COVID when lots of the schools weren't going on. That's why I had so many people. And the key for them was, we know as tutors, when you've got that initial first session, you need that child to go away with a couple of quick wins that they're going to go, oh, mum, dad, like I learned this, and actually that's really helpful. So masterclasses, the pedagogical design of them is very much on giving real, actionable, like very excitable. I had to be very like switched on for the lessons. You know, you have to be so passionate, but not too passionate as well, because then you turn some kids off. So, you know, it's a very fine line of like excited to share with them these tips, these tricks, these hacks, what we would call them, that would help them do their creative writing in a time limit and things like that, that they could take away. So I think, you know, from all the different things that we've talked about, from smaller groups, online groups, in-person groups, just understanding the pedagogical design. So maybe looking for that tutor that does that as their regular, their main, you know, offering, not looking to sort of say to a tutor who's more of a one-to-one in-person tutor, go, could you actually, like, we've got a group of children that like we all know each other, could you do something online for all of them? That's not going to be the person that's going to get the best out of that particular cohort of young people. So I would say that for me is key, the pedagogical design of the group and what the outcome is.
Yeah, and it makes so much sense, doesn't it? Because what you're trying to do is to get out of it has to look like this, or can you do that? It's that there are,
Yeah.
like say, so many different options, so many places that you can do to make sure you get exactly what you
Yeah.
need, because you're the one that's having to organize it, you know, either spend the money or get the time and the extra support that's needed to make it a reality. So I can't believe the time's gone already. Thank you so much, all three of you. It's been
Sure.
absolutely incredible. I think we've covered so many things. I had a few things written down which we've covered and more, which is always a sign of a great
Great.
conversation. And we must come back in and revisit it, because I think we could probably do every week for the next 5 years, but that's another story.
Don't say that, because we will.
Yeah, 'cause you're going to be in your room.
We've got yours. We've got
Exactly.
your meeting now.
Yeah, quite. So we've got the links and everything in the description, but just before we go, just tell people where you'd like them just to go and find out more, at least sort of check out what you're doing. Arthur, why don't you start us off?
If you're a parent or student looking for support with maths, just type in Arthur Moore Maths Tutor, wrong side, messed it up. Or if you're a tutor looking for support with your pedagogical knowledge, just come and find me on LinkedIn by searching Arthur Moore Maths Tutor, and I can talk to you about my free and paid offerings for CPD pedagogical support.
Which are
Wonderful.
amazing.
Excellent. And Sarah?
I agree.
They are amazing. I go on to some of those myself for my own CPD, so they are. You can find me on my website, sbtutoringuk.com, or on LinkedIn. If you're a tutor, you can just look up Sarah Brunner. My name's on the bottom. No, that way. I did it as well, Arthur. Never mind. And if you're a parent, most parents find me on Facebook as SB Tutoring.
Fantastic. And Lucy?
Yeah, so obviously on LinkedIn. So if you're a teacher, tutor, anyone, I'm on LinkedIn. All my consultants are on LinkedIn, but obviously Education Boutique is the name of the company. For tutors, if you're looking for daytime work, you know, it's very easy as a tutor to get into like evening work. So if you're looking for daytime in-person opportunities across England, definitely look up Education Boutique. And if you're a parent as well, we're here to support kind of the daytime stuff is our key. So if you've got a child that's struggling with attending school, that's absolutely something that we can consult with you on and get you funded tutoring for.
Amazing. And I think this is a beautiful way to finish off. Louisa's commented, really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you. It's such a privilege to be part of this industry and being represented by all of you.
Thank you, Louisa.
Amazing. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for commenting. Thank you so much for being here. Those of you that have been here live, really appreciate you spending your evening with us. If you're watching on the replay, then please do leave a comment if you want to. We can answer any questions. I'll pass them on to the experts. But yeah, really, thanks very much again to all of you for being part of this. It's been a wonderful conversation, a wonderful evening, and I look forward to doing it again very soon.
Thank you very much, Mark.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Education is not the filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire.